can't hit live. So I'm going to get started here in a real quick moment. Excited. I like it. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Great Resignation panel. I hope you're staying safe, staying cool, out of whatever heat might be going on wherever you may be. With COVID-19 vaccines now available, companies are asking their workforces to head back to the office. For many professionals who've spent the past year working from various locales, be it their home offices or even in somewhere very scenic, away from the pricey cities like San Francisco, this is a problem. The resistance to return to the office is resulting in a movement known as the Great Resignation, where upwards of 80% of professionals are looking to quit their jobs for more lucrative remote and flexible opportunities. Many are looking to move into tech where companies continue to grow, while others want to transition out of their in-person service sector jobs completely. That's why we brought together a distinguished panel today to discuss the Great Resignation. Leading this panel is Elisa Huang, an Alberts List moderator and bootcamp lead, helping job seekers land their next job. She'll be on to introduce our panelists in a moment. A little bit of housekeeping. This event is recorded. I'll be posting it to our YouTube channel and sending it to you by way of Eventbrite message. And that'll happen about 72 hours after this event concludes. Elisa, thank you. Over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Albert. As he shared, my name's Elisa. I'll just be facilitating this discussion, but really we want to keep it very informal. If you have questions that you want to throw out to our panelists, I'll be monitoring the chat. So just shoot it over and we'll make sure that it gets answered in one shape or form. And as Albert kind of already shared, we're here to talk about the Great Resignation. And I've got a couple of stats just to tee up the stage. The Department of Labor said that in the month of April alone, 4 million people in the US quit their jobs. So it's probably the biggest spike, biggest number we've seen so far. Why is this happening? So again, from the Bureau of Labor, there were 6 million fewer resignations in 2020 than in 2019. So there was already a lot of people that were stressed out that would normally have been looking. Just due to COVID, they stayed where they are. They worked twice as hard managing work-life balance. And it kind of sets stage for 2021, which is why we're really glad that everyone that's hopped on here is joining us for discussion. Is quitting the right choice for you? And before you quit, are there some options you might consider? And if you are ready to take that leap, how can you be a competitive candidate? So just to lead into the introductions, I'll start with April Starlight. She is the founder and recruiter of Tangerine Search, and she's doing a ton of direct hires right now, as we just shared. A lot of people are hiring right now. I'll let her kind of give her introduction and take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks everyone who made it today, who's watching live. Also happy for the folks who are going to catch this later. Happy to connect with everybody out there on the market looking for something new. As Elisa mentioned, I have a recruiting firm called Tangerine Search. I have started my business at the fall of 2019 after a decade of technical recruiting within the Bay Area. So really interesting time to get into this new business, like right during hiring freezes and all of that. So the great surprise for me is just how hot the job market has been this whole year. Basically, this year started off January just through the roof in terms of job orders. And I'm really seeing a big spike in hiring. As I mentioned, 10 years plus of recruiting in the Bay Area up until this point. So I have a lot of insights on how to apply, how to customize your resume, interview tips, salary negotiation, just tons of things. Have been sharing openings with Alberts List for the last year and a half now and have hosted a couple of events here. So definitely love the talent that's in this group and the enthusiasm, and happy to connect with the folks that are here tonight or anybody here who has questions. Thanks, Elisa.
Thanks so much, April. We'll kick it off to Paul. He has been sourcing recruiting for a variety of firms, Google, Uber, and Afterpay for the last several years. He's currently with Coinbase as a recruiter, and he is also a volunteer with Year Up, helping individuals with resume reviews, mock interviews, and that I'll let the man myth himself introduce.
Knowing that this is recorded, I'm just so embarrassed to say things that will be live forever. I have been specifically in sourcing and trying to find the right people for the companies that I work for the past 8-9 years or so. And I think a lot of my knowledge just comes from being frustrated as a job seeker myself every now and then. And so now that I've been on the other side, I can just share a little bit more about what they really care about, what they don't, and perhaps just some typical pros and cons about the interviewing and application process. And ultimately, I might just be more blunt than others, just because if you guys are taking the time to be here, you probably watched YouTube videos, you might have watched a TED Talk or two. I'm just going to say things that are more like relevant and specific to what I'm exposed to, which is the tech industry, and probably more so in the Silicon Valley or the New York, Seattle tech hubs. But yeah, looking forward to share more.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm just going to kick it off. We'll keep this really informal. Again, it's been relatively quiet in the chat. So for those that are signed on, feel free to just, share your candid thoughts or any questions you have. We'll keep this very informal. And if you want to come off mute and share, that's fine as well. I know Albert's, we keep it pretty relatively casual. So we have a couple questions in mind. First one is, has the so-called Great Resignation had any impact on your recruiting pipeline or your company's talent acquisition strategy? And we'll start with April.
Well, I can definitely say for me, I have been contacted by a ton of people just proactively, like my company's thinking about making me come back to the office. And now that I realize how much I love working at home, I'm looking for a new job. So I've definitely seen some evidence of this and folks getting ready to make that leap. The thing that I would say is that, it's also giving a better talent pipeline to companies that either are willing to be flexible, give people the option, or that are remote first. Like, this is the first year where I've heard this remote first term coming out of so many companies where they're using this as a regular thing that they're saying to try to sell themselves. And so I think that there's been a long time that folks have wanted to work remotely or telecommute. There's been kind of an emphasis in moving this direction for many years. And right now we actually have like the purchasing power, we have enough people on the job market who are all saying the same thing at the same time that we're really able to kind of negotiate and get that.
Awesome. Any thoughts from you, Paul?
Because I work in a tech industry where every company is always just okay with people being remote here and there, we just turn 100% remote. So in the tech industry where working remotely is always easier, it hasn't affected us at all. And in fact, we actually officially made a lot or all of our positions 100% remote. So yeah, we actually expanded our talent pool, and we're actually hiring from a lot more other places outside of our typical target area. So we actually have successfully expanded our talent pool to all of US. So it actually makes it, I don't want to say a lot easier, but certainly a little easier finding talents where they don't want to move. So yeah, not a thing in our industry, but I guess the other perspective, Elisa, you were saying is, if people are resigning because they don't want to go back to the office, then the tech industries have all the jobs that enable them to work remotely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've even seen some creative, I think, I don't know, they were saying like the Zennials, the millennials, a lot of people are going back to like their home country and working reverse hours, which I'm so tempted by. And so I think it'll be hard because a lot of the tech, I feel like at the same time that the tech companies have been really supportive of remote first, the tech companies, some of the bigger ones, are also the first ones to sort of call their employees back into the office. So it'll be interesting to see, like, once that happens, and then the Delta variant, like what's kind of like the official workplace policy later in the year. That was.
I think, oh, sorry to
No,
interrupt
go,
you.
please. Yeah.
Sorry about that. The one thing that I'm also seeing from my clients is that while a lot of managers really, they're not really that concerned with where you are or what time of day it is, where you're working, you run into these HR concerns, right? Like they have to, every employee, the employer has to pay your workers' comp, which means they have to have your home address listed with their insurance carrier, right? And so this is where, you know, they may not care what continent you're on. Okay, great. You want to work from Tokyo? It's like totally fine with them. But for the purpose of their HR, what legal, you know, they have these other limitations that come into play. So that's something that I thought of that while you were talking, Elisa. And the other thing that kind of comes into play with some smaller companies, because I do support a variety of startup clients, and they sometimes run into the issue of, okay, we're not incorporated in this area. So these are the few states where we can payroll you. So there's certain limitations, and I would definitely bring that up to anybody who's looking to apply, who wants to be remote, wants to stay remote. Bring that up and find out like where they're able to payroll. You can just ask that kind of directly.
Okay. I'm just taking some notes so that we can do a recap, but you've brought up so many nuggets of value, as I like to call it. So so for those that are on, we'll also be, if you have submitted your email, we'll be sharing some takeaways. Okay, that was awesome. And then that kind of, I guess, bleeds into the next question, which had been, what are companies, or what's your greatest fear as related to the Great Resignation, and how does that affect current hiring trends? Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I can start. Ever since we've made our company 100% remote, and so is a lot of other companies, we haven't seen any setback in both the growth of our company and also the locations where we're open to hire from. But to what April was mentioned, it is just either one, money to get incorporated into different states, and actually, does the company have the HR department to actually have the time to be incorporated, even if they want to? I think I've been in companies where they want to hire across, but if you're the only person in this state that we're trying to hire, then there's also like, well, is it worth, do we even have the time and the resource to actually want to incorporate them in this state? So sometimes it's not really the candidate, it's really more about the company, and you really never know where they're incorporated unless they publicly share the information. So if you get rejected or just not having any response from the company, know that it's not always just you. It might just be what the company, what constraint or locations are. But again, on my side, no slowdown at all. But our growth is also due to the fact that we're never really a physical first company. At Coinbase, we're a cryptocurrency. So there's just a nature of just never really having to be centralized, because our whole motto is to decentralize. But that might be more unique to my situation.
Anything to add, April?
I just really want to echo one thing that Paul said, but in a much more broad sense, because when you said don't take it personally, like there's so many reasons you could be rejected, like really, truly, I know from talking to candidates and, you know, having, like, there's a couple friends of mine right now who I'm trying to like help them through their interview process at different places. And it can be just like so crushing to get these rejections. And I see from reviewing applications and seeing what's going on, it can be so many things. It can be, we're not incorporated there. It can just be the timing. Like you could be the perfect candidate, but this afternoon we put an offer out to somebody. It could be so many different elements that it's hard to tell someone like, don't take it personally, but I just want to remind everyone to not take it personally, even though that can be like kind of hard to hear, but it can be something so small as like a hiring manager who just decides like absolutely have to have used this particular accounting software, and they need to know this module of it. And I don't want to talk to anybody who doesn't have that. And you could look on paper, or like you could have every other thing, and that's the one thing that they've decided is their sticking point. And as an applicant, you're never going to have that feedback. You're not going to know that's the reason. So I'm just want to put this in everyone's mind who's looking for a job right now. When you get that rejection, like, just keep going. It's a numbers game. Keep applying. There's so many variables that it's like, even as a recruiter, sometimes supporting these clients, there's so many aspects that even I don't know or get to. So I just want to throw that out there and just kind of like reaffirm everyone.
Yeah, and I'd like to piggyback off of April's point. So apparently what we do on this panel now is that when you are not selected for a position, and I know it's really common sense, but I always ask the hiring manager what made them go in a different direction. And usually I've gotten a response from it, and it was like, we're really looking for someone that has like X amount of, and it could be something really silly too. Like I've literally had a response that said, we're looking for someone that has at least 12 years of experience, you know, leading a sales team. And it's right. I haven't been in this space, the professional space that long, so I'm just not a fit. And so usually they're really candid, or they'll say like, there might be a position opening up in this team that I think you might be a fit for, and then they'll keep you in mind. So you never know where your next opportunity could come from. So I always say, and if you're looking for like a way to ask, it's just really simple to say, what made you go in a different direction? How can I be a more competitive candidate? If you know that this is this specific role that you want to be considered for in the future. So just some food for thought. Next question is, again, kind of a similar variation on what we discussed, which is, what is your recruitment or HR team doing as response to maybe some of the effects of the Great Resignation? So increased number of applicants for all roles, and an increased number of professionals in your company quitting. Feel free to chime in.
So I just say because remote work isn't a problem, so no one's quitting for that reason. Do I see an increased number of applicants? Yes, but also because our company went IPO. So that's not really, due to resignation, we just got a lot more news media coverage from the fact that we went, actually not IPO, DPO, direct public listing. So we just are lucky enough that we have the media coverage and the attention from a lot of people. And I think we did see some stats about we're such a small company relevant to other companies out there, but we are kind of the leader in our space. So super fortunate. We have a lot of applicants. We have no one quitting, but we're still trying to double the size of our company. So in general, we're hiring a lot.
Okay.
Fantastic. I can share some interesting information that I am aware of just from LinkedIn. I noticed a few months ago there was kind of a steep decline in folks applying to LinkedIn job postings, and I checked with my sales rep, and he was like, "Oh, this is happening across the board. People are there's actually less applicants," and I think because hiring is so hot and there's so many openings right now, that the time it takes to like really look into a job and figure out if you want to apply to it, like just people didn't, there was more jobs than people really had time to apply to at the same ratio that they normally do. And that was kind of like across the board. Seems like it's kind of restabilized and we're seeing more of the standard volume of applicants now over the last like maybe 4 or 5 weeks, but there was a good 2 or 3 month period there where so many companies, and I think what happened was, I'm extrapolating, but I think after 2020, so many jobs were on hold, right? So you had companies that didn't hire 2020 their initiatives. They have all their new 2021 initiatives, and they also have to hire back all the people who they let go, had to lay off, whatever. So we have like triple demand here. Like it's like, it's just super high volume. Like I remember during COVID, early COVID, my UPS guy was like, it's double Christmas, like, because he was so busy delivering packages, right? And I feel like 2021 has kind of been like that with hiring. It's like triple Christmas. So I think just that being how it was kind of drove down the number of applicants just because there's so many positions open.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon because I hear of so many people, there's so many job seekers right now in the market, and then there's also like triple times the amount of jobs, triple Christmas. That should be a hashtag, by the way, Albert. But somehow it's kind of like finding that nexus of that right candidate with the right job. And hopefully, I'd like to think that that's what us three are trying to do, is to make sure that you're not just applying to like 10 jobs a day and not getting anywhere. It's more like you're being very thoughtful and applying to 1 or 2, and then you get an offer from both, theoretically. So, and then let's double back real quick. I've got some activity on the chat, and there's a question from Emmy Ross's. What's your advice to someone who is thinking about pivoting into tech after a career in financial services and actually would prefer working in an office in person?
Okay. I think that's kind of a double question.
Yeah, switching industries. I know, I was like, feel free to, it's a 2-part.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a great time to pivot into tech, I think, because there's so many positions open, and there's a lot of companies that I'm working with that are more open to entry-level candidates than normally they are. So that being said, pivoting into tech could mean a variety of things. That could be like, are you trying to become a sysadmin? Are you looking to go into software engineering? There's a lot of companies right now who will take someone out of a boot camp or right out of college, or just who has limited engineering experience if they have a strong GitHub, and if they can pass a technical assessment, who can do like a live coding exercise during an interview. And that's kind of a threshold that's not normally there. It's normally a lot higher. Like we need to see 3 or 5 years of professional experience. But because the demand is so high and the pool is limited, companies are more flexible about who they will interview, I've seen. So that's what I would say, if it's, depending on what kind of tech job that you're going for. I do feel like there's still plenty of companies that are planning to reopen and would love someone who wants to come into the office. But any job that you apply to, almost any, is going to be remote right now. So you do need to be able to show that you can collaborate virtually. Like you can collaborate on Slack, or if your company uses Discord or whatever like communication tool they use, that's fine for you. You can hop on a quick video sync with your manager. You can use Jira, like whatever tracking tools that they have, that you can collaborate that way just as well as in office. Because, like to your point, Elisa, Delta variant, we don't know public health, how that's going to play out, how long it'll be. So you really kind of have to show right now, like, hey, I'd love to be in office, but I can also work from home. What do you think, Paul?
I think you cover a lot of things. I'm going to try to take it from that angle. I'm going to guess what the person might be asking. I'm going to answer in that way. I'm going to guess that as someone who's been just, let's say they're a project manager in financial service, and they're trying to be a project manager in the tech industry. So I guess not switching jobs, but just in a different field. And in that lens, the difficulty usually one is with see hiring managers who want someone who have done exactly X, and we want someone who have done X to come here. So if they've been in tech doing PM, we want that person instead of financial services or healthcare or any other industry. So if you want to break into tech in that sense, what you need to do is network. I know it's not a secret sauce, but you just need to network the shit out of people on LinkedIn and people through your connections. Because a lot of times, again, it's not you, is that when there are already so many people with that same experience, it's hard to just look at someone with a different resume and say, we'll give someone else a shot. So for you to actually have the chance to be on top of the consideration, you probably want to have a connection that can speak on your behalf, who can vouch for you. Usually those are your friends, former coworkers, maybe even recruiter or managers you have talked to in the past. And again, another cliche, but always end your interview on a positive note, always trying to build some connections. You never know what they can say to you, because ultimately, I do talk to a lot of people throughout my time, but the really, really good ones, I remember them forever. And if there are things that I ever come across their way, at the minimum, I'll say that they're really communicative, really eager to learn. And those are the little nuggets you need to build out throughout time to actually have a chance to make that switch. Of course, the other way is to take more of an entry-level job to break into the tech industry. And some of the entry-level job that might not be as obvious, but you can probably apply without much experience, is probably job titles that says coordinator, associates, assistant of any sort. As long as you have the right profile, they're probably willing to take a chance on you, regardless, as long as you have at least some of the things they're looking for. So hopefully that helps.
No, it's good. It's kind of like a drill down, like April's kind of give a general idea, and then we got a little bit more of a focused, like one area, jumping from one to the other. Okay, I just got a couple more questions, so I just want to make sure we get to everyone. Warren threw out there, well, I guess it's not so much a question, it's more of a comment. In that case, they would already know by reading the resume. It might be in reference to you don't get selected for a job. Like, is the reason, what would they always give the real reason? Warren, if you're out there, feel free to, like, if you have a question, feel free to clarify or put it in chat. I'll make sure we get that teed up. We also have a question that said, do you have any tips for new grads that are also in the Great Resignation, but kind of, you know, entering the workforce? Very general, but I would assume maybe just.
I have a few tips there.
Sure, yeah, I know I gave you like a kind of like a football field to play in, but yeah.
Yeah. So two things, again, networking. I don't typically encourage folks to spend too much time on cover letters, but if you're a new grad, this can go a long way. In particular, if you can clearly express why you're interested in a particular company. Like, let's take Coinbase, for example, is a very specific kind of business, is a very specific kind of company. I've been doing some recruiting for Crunchyroll, also a very specific kind of company. And so when I'm looking at folks who are new to the market, they're coming out of college, something like that, if they can clearly articulate what is compelling to them about working for this company, what their understanding of it is, like how they're going to be able to add to the business need, they can get kind of a step in front of other folks who are also recent grads. And then one other thing about networking and asking for referrals that I just want to throw out there, a lot of companies, many companies pay a referral fee. So say you're working at a company and you refer somebody in, you can actually get paid. Like, they will add a bonus, a referral bonus to your paycheck. And so anybody who feels a hesitation about reaching out to somebody, don't. You could be like their, you know, summer vacation, or you could be actually money in their pocket. So don't worry about reaching out and saying, hey, I'm really interested in this. I would give them a compelling reason why they should refer you, because they are kind of putting their neck on the line, right? So you tell them, like, this is how I am a relevant candidate. Like, I have X, Y, and Z experience that's really relevant, and I'm interested because A and B. Would you mind referring me in? Definitely lean on that network, because if you have that kind of personal referral, someone who's already there doing a great job, and they're willing to say, like, hey, check this person out, they're good, that can get you places as a new grad.
Awesome.
I think April usually covers like 90% of things. I'm like, what else? What value do I have here? I guess the one thing I'll say is, if you want to reach out to the recruiter of any company, just LinkedIn, connect them, send them a message, or send a connection request with why you're requesting, and once they accepts, follow through. Most of the time, not every recruiter has a time to help on everyone, but at the end of the day, recruiters are there to help people, even though most of the time it doesn't seem like they're helping you. We want to help, and as long as there are people who are willing to check up on us and follow through, and anything else that we can help you on, I'm more than happy to and have help connect a lot of people and just help them do interviews and stuff. So definitely message them, directly contact them. It could go a long way.
That's awesome. I second that. Okay, we got one more in the chat, and it's more of a, I guess not so much technical, but a resume-based question. Is it, and LinkedIn, is it better, even kind of in resumes too, but it says on LinkedIn to add months and years, your professional experience, or is just starting year and end year work? What do you guys think? Or it doesn't even make a difference?
I have a preference because I just switched from months to years. I guess it depends on, I guess, two things. It depends on what you're using LinkedIn for. I guess from a recruiter perspective, here's really what happens. I want to look for a, I don't know, project manager who has 4 years of experience. And if you happen to not meet that 4 years experience because you have put down month into your experience, then you will automatically be filtered out. So in a way, you're bridging, I guess, you're not even bridging, you're I don't know how to say it. You're not lying, but you don't have to specifically tell them that you haven't been there for X amount of time, just so you can squeeze yourself into a search that is designed to squeeze people out. So that's one area. If you were trying to get on people's radar, usually not including months will be more helpful. But if you're using LinkedIn to be like your actual resume that you want to use for everything and anything as a record keeper, then sure, you can include months, but it really depends on what you need it for. One key things about LinkedIn or any resume is you actually don't have to put all the jobs you have worked at. Even if you have a job that you don't want to put in there, just skip it. If you leave for 2 months or 1 month because your manager sucked or whatever else, you know how sometimes they do reference check and they're like, verify if you work here. Well, if you don't put your job on there, they're not going to verify that you didn't work there. They don't check with every company on the world to see if you work there. So there's no database for that. So skip the job that you don't want to put on there. No one cares.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's like a gavel, like, yes, definitely.
Yes, yes, yes. That's really great.
And then another one that I've heard that people ask me a lot just in the Facebook group is like, how long should your resume be? So now we know you don't need to list every job you've held on there. There's always kind of the age-old debate of like, is it supposed to be 1 page? Is it supposed to be 2 pages? And then I've even heard rules of thumb, like if you have over 12 years experience, then you can do 2 pages. Like, what do you guys think? Is there like an ATS filter or is a recruiting preference?
I think the 1-page rule is from like the 1970s when you had to print stuff, you know, and carry it on a clipboard into the manager's office or something. 1 page, 2 page, 3 pages, it's all kind of the same. If you can be clear and succinct and you can summarize your experience in a way that is relevant to the job. You know, if you're going past 5 pages, it looks like you're trying to get caught in an ATS filter, or like you can't get to the point, or you can't summarize your experience. Sometimes I'll see resumes that are long like that if it's like someone who's been contracting for a while. So say maybe you're really hyper specialized, right? Like your job is this super specialized thing and you go into different companies and you solve that. And so you've been at a lot of places. So I would summarize like, this is what I've done and here are the places, so that it doesn't eat up a ton of pages. But rule of thumb to me, what I think is appropriate, and Paul, I'd love to hear your thought too. No more than 3 pages unless you absolutely have a long career that is still super relevant to what you're applying to today. And if you have a long career, absolutely do not go past page 5. That's what I think.
Yeah, I have my bias. And by the way, these are all just my bias. I do not represent anyone, or I don't even know if anyone thinks the way I do. I don't, when a recruiter goes through resumes, I guess thinking through like my mindset or my narrow mindset, they go through hundreds of them. They don't actually look through every bullet points, and they rarely do. The only thing they look at, number one thing they look at is where you work at. What's your job title? How long you've been there, just by default. And sometimes if you don't meet that first screening of job title, companies, how long you've been there, it will be an automatic reject. I'm not saying this applies that you shouldn't put more things, but that's one of the first things that we use to help screen people in or screen people out. Once you get past that stage, a recruiter would then look at, well, if they're an engineer at X, I do want to see if they're doing distributed system scale things, language to use. But at the end of the day, the recruiter may not even understand everything about your technical expertise in your area, that it becomes useless if your resume is being viewed by someone who don't know. And the people who actually look at resume, like the actual hiring managers, are never the first one to look at your resume. So you actually have to go past the recruiter's screen who don't have the knowledge before you actually get to talk to a manager who will just talk to you about what you've been doing. So on a resume, I personally don't go above 2 pages just because a recruiter wouldn't read them. And when you have actual contents, only highlight the things that is easily understandable across all. Like I was ranked #1 in my team of 15, or I was hitting or exceeding my goal Q3, Q4, and Q1. Things that are easily distinguishable that even anyone without specific experience can understand what you're talking about will be helpful just for me to understand. I don't know anything about project management, but this person looks like he or she has been good at her job or his job. So those are the things I would go by. Not too long, but also focus on what you actually want to put in there.
Okay. Okay, so along the same lines of that, because I know we're talking about a little bit of a sidebar on LinkedIn and resume. So a question from Amber is, how important is it for your resume and LinkedIn page to match exactly? And it's around wording of the resume as well as the profile. And her concern is more around the company monitoring employees as pages. So she doesn't want to make it so much of an alert, if you will. So the question would be, do recruiters look at differences in LinkedIn and resume as a negative? And then I just want to tack onto that also is, like, I guess some companies will use sort of a standard hierarchy of like professional, senior professional, principal, etc. But then on LinkedIn, they might call themselves a senior manager instead of senior professional or senior principal or whatnot. And if it doesn't match when their company HR is doing the new company, right, that they're wanting to be hired into, it doesn't completely match. Is that a deal breaker? What do you guys think? Feel free to unpack that.
That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
So #1, Amber, you can just, when you're making updates to your LinkedIn, it will ask you, this is a new feature they've rolled out, which I love. You can now opt to not share that update with your network. So feel free to update your LinkedIn and then just, when it asks you that, say no. It's highly unlikely that anyone that you're working with is actively going out and looking for wording changes on anybody's LinkedIn page. So just so that everybody knows, like, you can choose, they say you get a new job and you want your network to know, so you get all those kudos and congratulations, you know, it feels like happy birthday on Facebook or something. Like, you can opt in, but you can now also opt out. So that's good. I had an experience where I was working at a staffing firm a few years ago, and they went through this rebranding, like, marketing idea that they had. And instead of calling us recruiters, they had some very interesting title. They wanted us to be like the intelligent, like it was the equivalent of like the Subway sandwich artist, like, or like, like some weird title that doesn't mean anything in the world. So I just kept my title as senior recruiter because that's what people will probably respond if I'm messaging them. And I've seen a similar thing, maybe not as dramatic, but a lot of companies have their own internal nomenclature for whatever jobs that they have. And it's really not an issue for you to adjust your title as long as what you're adjusting it to clearly represents what you actually do and the more standardized way of calling that thing. So and that will also help you appear in more search results sometimes. So one thing that can be good, if you're not sure, you can go to Google Trends. I'm not sure who's used this tool before that Google has, but it's just look up Google Trends and you can add 2 different trends in there, right? So like recently I was looking for a Ruby developer, right? So I put like Ruby engineer and Ruby developer, and it will tell you which one is more popular, which one more people are searching for. And so you can kind of like reverse engineer and make sure that you show up in more search results. And it will also tell you, that tool will actually break down the location where each term is more popular. So this whole country likes Ruby engineer, except for Idaho, where they call it Ruby developer. So if you're looking for a job and you're in Idaho, then go with the thing that's more popular there. So you're always trying to find a job is like you're trying to hit the bullseye on the target. So reverse engineer it as much as you can without lying, right? Like you can change your title. You're not going to change it to like you're the CEO or something. As long as it's relevant to what you're doing, it's fair game, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, I guess so many things to unpack, but write whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. But 2 things that you might want to be aware of. One was what April covered. Put the job title that makes sense to the world. No one's going to think you're lying. It doesn't matter. And no one's going to check. The only person that check, which is my point number 2, is when they do a reference call and they'll be like, hey, so-and-so, Paul said he was a senior at your company. Just want to see how he's doing. And your manager's like, oh no, Paul wasn't a senior. He was like, I'm not a senior. Then that reference call would have just killed your offer letter that you were going to get. So at least to a sense that if someone would ask for a reference check, that's not a lying title will be great. If things are different in your LinkedIn and resume, keep in mind that you don't owe anyone the actual official of anything. Because when you think about job interviews, people ask you what you do, what's your title, or how long you've been there. Like no one actually needs to know the specific of anything. You can just write whatever you want. So what we think of as recruiter is we know a LinkedIn is a representation of yourself, that how you want to be seen by social media, online, Google, whatever people find you on. It's what you want to write. If you look at my LinkedIn, my job description writes, I serve Mango Go-Go, which I did, and I loved it. I don't really care what I put there, but when you think about a resume, that's more of an American accepted way of an official representation of what you do. So I would probably generally advise that resume should be a little bit more accurate. LinkedIn, do whatever, put yourself as a unicorn, say you're head of a department, even if you're a team of 2, no one cares. No one's going to catch anything. And you just want to put it in a way that catches the recruiter's eye because that's the job you want. Just do that.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got a ton of questions, which is awesome. So I'm just apt to address all of them. And we've got a couple from Rogelio. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And I see there's 4 in Q&A, so don't worry, I've not forgotten you, but we will get to everything. The first one is, how can someone, and I think this is what he means, how can someone who is willing to take an entry-level position at a dream company they want to work, but doesn't meet 60 to 70% of the requirements still pursue the job. So the question is around kind of someone who wants to take an entry-level position. So kind of what we talked about, they're willing to take kind of a step down. They're eager to learn because they want to work at a dream company, maybe one of the FANGs, right? But they don't meet 60%, 70% of the requirements. Yay or nay, should they go for it? How do they go about that?
If it's a job that's entry-level job that you don't meet 60-70% requirement, is probably not an entry-level job. It will probably say something like work hard, no like computer skills, but it should be something very basic. I mean, if you want it, you should get it. Like you should try to go for it. But I don't actually have more than what I shared earlier, which is you keep connecting with people, keep networking. If you're not being selected for a job, let's put it the other way. If you're not being selected for a job that seems to be entry level and you're obviously qualified, if not overqualified, couple things go through the recruiter's mind that you might want to address. One, they probably want more money. Two, they apply for the wrong job. Three, they're just people who seems to be earlier in their career that are just by default more open and are ready for a compensation for the type of work that they get to do instead of hiring someone for different reasons. We actually just hired someone who has a master in education and has been doing that for 7 years. And she's like, nope, I'd rather take an entry-level job because being in education and in specifically research and clinical work is just way less rewarding compared to what a tech job can offer her. Anyways, and the only way sometimes you get that job is through referral friends, someone can speak on a good behalf of you. It's just hard for them to suss out so many other maybe resume that is a better match. So my best advice would just be, again, network, talk to someone, get referred in.
I would say this is another area where a cover letter might do you good, where you can give a compelling case about how, hey, maybe I don't meet 60 to 70% of these requirements, but here's what I did that's really similar that taught me transferable skills. This is why I think I could be good. And this is why I want to. This is what I love about your company. This is what I've heard about your team.
Awesome. I'm just going to move things along and a couple of quick ones and then Q&A, you're right up there. What's the difference between recruiter and sorcerer? And one of you can just answer that if you want.
Since I've been a sorcerer for a little longer, I'll try. Big companies will have a sorcerer do the top of the funnel, which is resume screening, first initial phone call with the recruiter, probably put you in a first phone interview with the team that you're interviewing with. And once you're ready to come on site or virtually on site where you meet more people at once, maybe 3, 4, 5 people, then we hand it off to the recruiter who handles the on-site interview, salary negotiation, compensation, and actually getting you to sign the offer. So that's where we split up the work between kind of the headhunting work where sourcing does and recruiter will do the other half. But some companies just don't have sorcerers and the recruiter by default is doing the whole funnel at what sorcerer would normally do.
And then one more. If a potential employer calls for a reference, do they call the companies for my resume that I provided contact information for, or do they call all of them, including my current employer? And I guess that you guys can read through it also on the chat. It says, I guess that regarding the current employer, would they call before or after? I think it's before, and also you have to give permission because I think people decline, they don't want that.
So I can speak to this. So there's 2 things that can happen here. So one thing is like the reference check, which kind of Paul was talking about that, and that's pretty standard practice where you call and like, hey, what was your experience working with this person? What's their strengths, their weaknesses? How can we, set them up for success in this new role, right? Where you're actually having that conversation. Some companies, like I supported Blue Shield of California, Kaiser Permanente, like larger corporate entities, and particularly any that are dealing with like a regulated, federally regulated environment like that, like banking or anything like that, they're going to do as part of their background check, they're also going to do employment verification. And that process is a little bit different, where they just reach out to your current and previous employers. They only do it after you have given your permission. And the only question that they ask is, did, Joe Schmo work at your company this date to that date? And they're looking for yes or no. And in that case, they usually have like a technicality of like a 90-day window. So, I might remember it like, oh, I think I started, working with this company in March of this year, but really it was May. And I just misremembered it when I was putting my resume together 4 years later, something like that. So they give you a little window in case you've made a slight mistake, but they're looking to make sure that you had roughly the same title that you put on your resume, roughly the time frame that you said that you worked there, and the fact that you actually worked there. In the case where they're doing an employment verification, if you want to wait until you already have passed the background check to give notice, typically you can provide some proof of employment. So you can provide like, here's my most recent pay stub along with my offer letter, something that shows the beginning of when you worked there and the fact that you're there now. And they will usually take that in lieu of contacting that current employer. So you can wait, say you're working at, some companies still require a drug test, right? So like, or a credit check if you're working at like a credit union or something like that. So you can wait until everything is completely done and you want to give notice. So there's ways to get around that with your current employer. And you can tell wherever you're interviewing with, like, I'd rather you not contact my current employer. That's fairly standard. Everyone understands the reason why. Like whoever you're talking to in HR, they also would not want to lose their job. Like, they get that motivation of not wanting to give it away until you're ready to give notice.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think it's spot on. Okay, I'm gonna hit the Q&A. We'll hopefully just make it a lightning round. So the first one is, how would the Great Resignation impact minorities or promotion of diversity? Any relation between the two, or what do you guys think?
I don't know that, like this, I don't know that they're really related, but I can say it's like this weird thing happened where every company woke up on the same morning and was like, hey, wait, we don't have any diversity on our team. Like there is this huge like DE&I initiative in every major company, every startup. Like it is is top of mind for all of my clients right now. Everybody is looking, right? So I don't know how much they're related, but there's a lot of opportunity right now. If you're a woman in tech, you're queer, you're a person of color, like there's a lot of companies even looking for like, how do we get more like disabled, like every kind of way of adding diversity. I think the one area that's still kind of overlooked in this area is really age. That's like the one place where I think it's kind of like slow to pick up. But it's hard for companies to figure out. They just are basically realizing like, we have this problem. And I hear a lot of conversation of like, how do we fix it? Or how do we source for this? And we don't really know. So I'm aware of a few different job groups, networking groups. If you can get involved in any, say you're like a person of color and you're looking for like an engineering role or a role in finance or whatever, get involved in some of those. Depending on the group, they may have job leads, where they like email out certain leads here and there. A lot of companies are trying anything that they can to get in contact and get more applicants in. So any way that you can kind of like network or kind of raise your hand for companies that are posting about being interested in diversity, apply into those places because it's a real initiative at a lot of places.
Yeah, I think that was kind of a good way to tackle that one. And one thing was just, there's a lot of debates in some of the like Reddit threads about, just because DE&I is such a big topic or buzzword lately, is who falls under the bucket of persons of color? Is it just, and like what the term African American, Blacks, like what do we call them? And then Latinos, Hispanics, and then are Asians considered persons of color? Because a lot of people feel like they're not, they don't face job discrimination or they don't fall under that bucket, and they don't face bias, but would they be under that same umbrella?
Yeah, I think these are all things that companies are trying to figure out right now. And the best way to like basically summarize the end goal, right? The end goal is to have people who all come from different backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds. They're, like I said, different ages, just they have just different types of backgrounds because everybody will solve problems differently. It's like if you're stuck on the side of the road and you have everybody there has the same background, if it's like one person doesn't know how to change the tire, you have all four people who don't know how to change the tire. Like you want people with different ways of thinking, ways of coming at a problem. So I don't really know how to answer your question, Elisa, about like how it is defined, how it should be defined. Like that seems like a question a lot bigger than I really know about. But I would say just having a diverse background and people who come at problems from different angles is really important. I don't know, Paul, what's your experience on this?
All right, I'm just gonna say it. Like, I don't know if it's right, but I'm gonna say it. We don't use persons of colors in hiring recruitment. We use the term underrepresented minority, which kind of goes with what April was mentioning. If in our company, our internal employee population doesn't reflect the market that we're serving, then we actually have a difference in, I guess, what population is versus what our internal employee database shows. So in general, whites and Asians do not fall under underrepresented minority unless you're in a place or companies that have that. But typically, I guess in the Bay Area and maybe big cities, those two groups don't follow. Usually it is more geared towards female. If in a tech discipline, there's more females, or there are more males than female. But I guess the question about like, how does a Great Resignation impact? There just so much assumption that I have to go through to try to address that. But usually, yes, even the non-Asians, non-white, the companies are referring to Blacks, are referring to Hispanics, Native American. Those are the typical group that things bucket under. Not sure how it's going to affect or not affect your candidacy, but those are kind of the definition that big companies tend to use.
Okay. No, that was good insight. And what I just threw out there, April, I wanted to kind of share what I'm seeing on the thread, I guess the blogs and what's happening in the street. There's not an answer. It's more just people are discussing that and
Yeah.
like saying, like, obviously there's the official term used amongst recruiters and then kind of this street term of persons of color. Like, I feel like I would fall under like the bucket of like, I want to be under the diverse candidate portfolio. But to Paul's point, sometimes certain groups that feel that way, like maybe certain Caucasian women or like Asians, maybe they don't they don't fall under that bucket. I don't have answers to this. I'm just putting ideas and thoughts that have been brought up out there to see what you guys think. Okay.
I think one thing that I would definitely say on this, there's a lot of interest in bringing diverse candidate pool. So if you're part of some minority group, like you're queer, you're Black and you're, in engineering, whatever the thing may be, also evaluate that company, not just like, what are you bringing to the table? Because then you're bringing your diverse perspective to them, but like, what do they have to offer you? Because right now, every company is looking to add diverse talent and make sure that like, okay, well, here's what we have for you. Like I have one client, they have a super diverse leadership team. Like they have 60% women in their leadership team. So they really have a lot to offer candidates who are coming in to this diverse workplace. So kind of like also know that you have a bit of negotiating power and really evaluate like what benefits are there for you. Like, you know, anything. If it's like you're interested in education stipend or ways that they can help you, like for you to grow in your career, whatever your goals are, evaluate them on that, and just know that you have a little bit of extra bargaining power.
Moving to kind of a different arena, how we have a question from an anonymous attendee. How can we utilize the hiring market increase for salary negotiation leverage? And that kind of fell into my one of my questions, which was, before someone quits, what are some things that they can explore or internal resources to fulfill what they feel like is in their current role? So this could be general ones that you guys know of within HR, and then which aligns into their question is how best to negotiate for what they want to stay, which a lot of times tends to be tied to salary.
Paul, do you have any?
So Elisa, I was thinking about the question here, but it seems like you talked about something else. But let me try to answer one of them.
Yes.
How do we utilize the hiring market increase for salary negotiation leverage? I guess you don't. For me, it's more so that, again, companies do one of these two things. One, they have a very structured compensation philosophy. They know what market rate they're willing to offer. For example, I guess at Coinbase again, we know that we'll pay at the 75th percentile of market. We just know. We did our research. We know what we're targeting. There's nothing you can do to change our mind. That's just that. Company have set philosophy. You're set into this range. Second is companies are a lot smaller. They don't really have a set philosophy. They're kind of changing the comp depending on how they go. So that's, I guess, areas where you can try to talk through with the manager, talk through with your recruiter. But the main thing about salary negotiation is you don't, well, maybe for April, if you're placing someone to another company, that's a different story. But if you're applying internally, you never talk about salary until you pass the interview. You just never. And the one thing about that is, imagine that you're trying to apply for the job, and the first question the recruiter asks you is, what's your salary expectation? And let's say I say 100K, whatever. And the recruiter is like, wow, there's no way we're going to pay 100K for you. So, well, too bad we don't match. So unless you're okay with 80K, like there's no point of moving forward. And you're like, fuck. Like, I want to move forward, but I already set my price too high. Now I have to go back and say I'm okay with 80K. And that's when you kind of put yourself in a hole throughout the process, because if you negotiate at the later stage where like you pass the interview, hiring manager loves you, the whole team loves you, you love them, and you're like, I want to join at 100K, and the recruiter's like, wow, we can't. And now you have everyone on the hiring panel that wants you on their team, and they might do more than what they're willing to do before they met you. So whatever you do, don't talk comp in the beginning. Avoid that question. Say something else, whatever. But quick 2 cents there from me.
Recent California law in the last 5 years, I forget exactly when it was passed, but as a recruiter, we're no longer allowed to ask you what you're making in your current role. And as an addendum to that, if you ask us what the range is, we have to provide the range for you. So the best way to negotiate for a good salary is to know your worth and to understand the range that the employer has set aside there, and kind of be a bit flexible within that. Just having that information in hand. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, because I think there was some talk about like, how do you get your current company to compensate you better? What's that thing on TikTok? Like, if he wanted to, he would, right? Like, your company already knows. They already know what you do. They, if they're not compensating you, if they're not offering you, they're showing you, like when people tell you who they are, believe them. You can definitely do the standard things of like asking, at the time of your review, like, hey, can we talk about compensation or like a bump in pay, this and that, but you essentially know the benefits and, the pluses and minuses of where you're at. I never would recommend that folks take a counter offer. I've seen this happen a ton of times where you go out, you interview, and the company that you're at goes, oh no, don't leave. And then they offer you something else. Of the dozens of cases I've heard of this, I know one single person where it worked out for them long term and they stayed and were very happy in the role that they almost left for, more than a year. For the most part, what happens is the company that you're at, now they know you're looking. They also, now they're scared you're going to leave, even though you didn't. And they start looking to replace you. It's in the back of everyone's mind. And it just doesn't, it's just much better. I think, in my opinion, what I've seen is just to make a clean break, have a fresh start, and go where you want to go. That's my 2 cents.
Yes, thanks for that. That was one of the questions that was sent on the back end and in terms of just how best to negotiate for this magic figure that you want to stay. And which, to your point, I think you are right, because if you make up your mind to leave, there is kind of that thought already. And so if you stay, there's a lot of layers there to impact. The other thing that I run into a lot, I'm sorry if you guys hear some background noise. I've left my husband with my infant, and now he appreciates me. That's all I can say. No, I'm just
COVID. That's the whole world now. You're fine.
Right? Yeah, it's so easy to take care of an infant, right? But the other thing that I hear a lot from just working with Albert's community is I found out what my coworker makes, like peer level, and they make 20,000 more. Like, what can I do to level up? And just listening to what you're saying, April, it doesn't sound like there is. I mean, I guess you could always go to HR and say, I found out this professional, my peers making more than me, and maybe talk with your manager about it. But would that be like an indication of like, yes, pull the trigger to start looking or leave? Or, I mean, is there a way to still stay within the company just knowing this?
I mean, if you had the initial conversation and you were like, I wouldn't necessarily throw my coworker under the bus, right? Who disclosed this information. I would probably say like, I'm being contacted by recruiters for other opportunities, and I'm hearing figures that are a good however many % over my current compensation package. I really like my job here because of X, Y, and Z. I like the culture, your snacks are great, whatever your, like, I'm just being silly, but whatever your reasons actually are. And then say, is there anything that you can do to help bring me up to like current market rate, given that I am taking care of this list of responsibilities and this is the correct compensation like on the market today. And I really love it here. So I want to stay and be fairly compensated. And then if they're, they'll tell you who they are right there. They'll either be like, oh, interesting, let's look into it, we'll get back to you. Or they'll be like, if they don't really hear you, then they're not really also listening. So you can start looking for another option, I would say. What do you think, Paul? You've been in-house for a bit.
Oh man, I don't feel like I have good answers. I feel like it's just reality. You should quit. There's no point. It's just, again, I guess I'll frame my answers. If you're in a situation that your manager truly never looked at pay because they just don't have to keep an eye on that, they inherited the team, they don't really look at how much people are paid, and they just kind of operate it, I don't know, months, years, just like fine, then yeah, maybe there's true like gap that is unnoticed. But most of the time, that's not the case. Like they know someone else negotiated better than you. They know that they were able to close you at a lower amount, and now you're stuck. And if after at least a year, when performance review happens, if that happens in your company, and there is a review of an increase of base salary or whatever compensation you have, those are usually the trigger that any company would use to bring you back up to what is fair. Fair is subjective. You would never, what is fair to you is never fair to someone else. So but at least like if they look at similar people in positions, similar positions of people you're working with, at least they're trying to match and bring you up to an equal playing field. If that didn't happen after a perf review, then you are probably looking at things that are even more subjective, which is ultimately how much are you really good at your job. If you're being paid like a lot less than your peer, and after a year you're still being paid so much less, either your manager doesn't see the same way as you do, they don't value you as much, you're not as good as a performer as someone else, or the manager's actually powerless. There's a internal promotion. Every company has a set budget of how much they can increase someone else's salary. The manager don't even have the power to increase you because now you're already locked in at that starting salary. And the only way you actually have a huge jump is you get a promotion or you switch jobs. And a lot of times, even when you get a promotion, you don't get as much as you switch a job. So my best advice in anything related to trying to get more money is you just got to take another job. Get used to interviewing, get used to joining other places, get familiar with switching jobs every few years.
Good advice. Okay, a couple more to tackle. Is it safe to say companies that are leaning towards hybrid or on-site are not going to change their mind?
I'll probably say they will change their mind all the time. Sorry, just unfortunately. It's never going to be a guarantee. So unless you trust your company, that's the only thing you have to go off of. They don't have to honor any rules.
I think that if you join a company and they say they're remote and they put the words remote in your offer letter, you can hold them legally to that. If they're in some sort of flux about like, we're coming back to the office, but we don't know how many days a week or when it will happen, all of that seems to be totally up in the air. We don't even, we have so many questions about like new rising case numbers, if it's safe, there's a variety of concerns. And so basically companies are going to do whatever they think is going to cost them less and create the more productivity from their team. So, and that their perception of what those two combinations will be is rapidly changing, and it's kind of flip-flopping a lot. So I think unless it's a company that is specifically saying like, this is a remote environment and we're hiring you to be remote, you don't really necessarily know how it's going to be down the line.
Good, solid insights. Moving down the line, has the interview and hiring process been faster remote than incorporating kind of an on-site component? Yay or nay?
Yes.
Go to Coinbase, guys. All my clients say answer is no. I mean, in some ways, yes, in that everything is like, it's like on-site, like virtual on-site, right? It's just like a series of Zoom meetings. So you don't have to commute, you don't have to go there. But also that being said, it seems like maybe there's teams that are not used to collaborating remotely, and they're still kind of like catching up to like, how do they sync up after the interview to share feedback, or they don't have their process together the same way that they did when they were in office. So this might be just a thing that depends company to company. And another thing that goes into timing on interviews a lot is just what other candidates are in the pool. What is the manager's style of interviewing? Some managers won't make a decision until they're like, well, we need to have 2 viable or 3 viable candidates to compare to one another. And other managers are like, hey, if you find a great person, I'm ready to make them an offer like tomorrow. Like, so it depends. There's a lot of variables there.
I think the only thing that makes sense in my world to say a simple yes is faster is a scheduling component. We just don't have to worry about like people having the time to come on site. Everyone works set hours. Everything else you mentioned, April, makes a lot of sense to slow down. But if those are the reason why they're slowing down, that remote or on-site, they would still have those same reasons of taking their time.
Yeah. I'm just not necessarily seeing things speed up to the point that I would expect. If it's just like, hey, I'm just sending you a Zoom link. Like you can make a decision easier, I would think, but I'm not necessarily seeing it to the extent I would think.
Yeah, it seems like the physical component's been removed, but like as far as the not red tape, but just the administrative part, like the back and forth, like we're setting up X amount of meetings. There's still that kind of set time it takes to, I guess, the due diligence.
Yeah.
Okay, moving along. How many interviews would you say is the upper threshold to handle simultaneously when on the market for a new job?
Are you working and taking on interviews? Are you just interviewing? Like, I think that is going to change depending on the person. You don't want to take on more interviews than you can come authentically prepared for. Like you've actually looked into this company, asked around, you're coming with like, here's my reason I really want to work here. Like, had the time to do a thoughtful review of the folks that you're going to be talking to, like their backgrounds. If you don't have the time to really prepare yourself for that, don't set yourself up for failure. And that number is going to vary depending on other factors in your life. Like, like, do you have an infant at home? Like, are you working currently? Like that number will vary.
Yeah. And then last one is this a good thing to disclose if you have a non-physical disability like mental or something like fibromyalgia? And then I think I saw one in the chat also say, does it go anywhere when you disclose that you're, I have to go back and look at it on like if you're veteran status, disabled veteran status, which is kind of more of an HR question, but do you guys have any insight on that? So
Some
is
companies,
oh, go ahead. You got it.
in terms of veteran status, some companies actually are looking to bring on more veterans. So veteran status is a great thing to disclose. Particularly, some companies will actually advertise that and promote that. So that's a great thing to let them know that like, hey, I fall into this category. Any other type of disability that you have, you just need to basically explain like, these are the accommodations that I would need in order to be able to do this job, right? So like I've interviewed people before who were deaf and we did interview over chat, but it wasn't a job where they needed to be hearing people. Like they were going to be taking phone calls or anything, right? It was a type of role where they could do it without that. And they just needed, X, Y, and Z accommodation. So you just share what accommodation you would need in order to be able to do the job.
Okay. And then one more from the chat box is if an interviewer pressured me to tell them my salary at the first round, which I know we've already kind of talked about the legal aspect of that. Is there anything I can do later on so I can still negotiate my salary if I get an offer?
I'll say yes, because here's exactly what you can say. I feel like I lied to my recruiter so much. I'll probably say something like, hey, I know I agreed to 80K and I was really open to 80K. But at this point, I actually was lucky enough to get a few other companies to be in the process with me. And they're offering me a much higher range. And I was wondering if there's anything you can do to actually increase the amount that we have initially agreed on, so that I'm actually being competitive based on what other companies have offered me.
And especially right now with the job market so hot, it's very believable whether or not it's literally true.
Yeah. I would probably say the same thing, even though it's not true. I'll be like, yeah, I have a lot going on just to see what I can get out of this recruiter. And honestly, the thing is, you probably keep in mind, if they say no, and that's the best that they can offer, like if you're comfortable with taking a job, why not? There's everything lined up. It could still be a good place, but I'm literally just saying that just to see if there's any wiggle room.
I know like just piggyback off that, I know one thing that a lot of job seekers have asked in the Facebook group is when a recruiter asks you for, which I guess in this question it says pressuring them to tell them your salary, which I don't think they should be doing that. But anyways, if they ask you about your salary, or they ask you like, what are you looking to make, or what's your target range or whatever, what do you guys think is a succinct way of answering that? A, if you are open to telling it, and B, if you're not, how do I deflect or just decline answering? Any like good templates that people can maybe plug in for future interviews?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say like, this is what candidates tell me when I ask them like, what are you targeting? And they'll just say, well, I'm flexible within the appropriate, market rate. Can you share what the range is, the salary range is for this role? It's pretty straightforward. You can also come in kind of strong, again, if you know your worth, if you've had these conversations with a few companies and you know like, hey, this is what I'm worth, and you feel fairly confident that you can go out and get some job within that range, as you can just confidently tell them, yeah, I'm looking for around, 100,000 plus a bonus, or total comp of 135 or something like that. If you consider base, bonus, or any equity, that's the other thing to kind of take into consideration. It's also a good way if you've given them a number that's too high, where you can go, well, we can talk about total compensation, like what's the value. If you want to kind of backtrack, like, oh, I do really want this job, but doesn't quite pay as much as I said, you can say like, what's the value also then of the benefits, any 401k matching, et cetera, to keep the conversation open.
Paul, any thoughts?
I'll probably say I don't feel comfortable talking about now because compensation is not all I look for. And I would much rather get to know the team first to really understand how I fit into this company before just anchoring this conversation on a number. And then I'll come back and ask for more. I will come back and ask for more money later, but I'll just say that it sounds good. It's simple. I'll go back on my words later, but that's what I would say first.
Yeah, that's great. It's awesome. Both approaches are really good, and you can take both to the bank. Just please copy and paste, use it, right? So
I love that. Not anchoring this conversation to a number. That's great.
Yeah.
Great way to
let me take notes on that for the group there.
There's going to be a lot of Bay Area job seekers saying that next week.
Okay, it looks like a couple more in the chat, and it's more like general, right? So feel free to just chime in there. So are remote workers in rural or suburban areas paid less than remote workers in major cities for the same job? Okay, pretty self-explanatory. Yes. Can you, unfortunately, can you negotiate salary after you start working?
Normally, I would say not very successful, but this person does have a good point. It looks like Nina.
Salaries tank, yeah.
Yeah, that salaries did tank, but you have to basically, if that conversation comes back as like, no, we're not going to adjust it, you have to be ready then to go on interview. So I would get my resume brushed up, start looking at other things, and then initiate that conversation. Because if they go, well, no, then you know that there's a no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, where like you can negotiate, but probably won't get it. And that, again, that may or may not have to do with what your manager or your company can control. But it doesn't hurt to ask. And unfortunately, if the answer is no, then I'll go back to just looking for a new job, prepared, get out there, try something else.
Okay. And then kind of just to round out, we're kind of nearing the end of our session at 7:30, is one of the questions that was sent in prior was, when interviewing for new roles, basically like the droves of people that have left their job for a new role, everybody's always asked, why are you leaving your current role? Do you guys have any ideas or templates on how best to answer it? Is there like a good answer that recruiters look for, etc.? Versus like, I hate my job and I hate my boss.
I think mostly this is a test to make sure that when you leave the job that you're interviewing for, that you're not going to say anything negative. That's the number one thing that they're looking for. So even if it is that, just the best thing that you can say really is anything that's going to be like completely blameless on both sides. Like, wasn't my fault, wasn't their fault, just, you know, they had changing business initiatives and my role was eliminated, or so, you know, changing business need. And so I took an opportunity with a growing company, or like I'm looking for an area with more growth because this is a great place to work, but I'm just not seeing the opportunity to develop my skills. Something where it's like, it's not their fault, they're wonderful people, but I'm just looking for something a little bit more. It's kind of what I would say.
Mhm.
I think I'll probably say I really like my team. I really like the manager I work with. I think we actually all get along really, really well. It's just that within the team that I'm working in, they told me that the growth just isn't as big as what I like it to be. And I just want to explore what's out there.
Okay.
Another great one too is like, I'm actually not looking. I'm actually not looking, but I just love this company so much. And I saw this opening, like my friend shared it with me. Like if you have a compelling reason, like if this is a dream job company, you can just say like, it just matched my skills so much and I've always wanted to work here. And I thought this is my opportunity to have this conversation.
Okay. That's a good approach. I'm actually not actively looking.
Of course, you can't do that if your LinkedIn says you're open to new opportunities, right? Like that, then it's no longer like
it's
believable.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's kind of a wrap up of our webinar. Honestly, we packed so much in there and I'm sort of guilty, the one that's doing all that. But I want to just quickly say thanks to the panelists, April and Paul, for spending an hour and a half out of your, just tacking it on to end of your workday and answering all of our attendees' questions. And then thank you for everybody that stayed with us during this happy hour. Just talking through, you know, a couple of considerations for the Great Resignation. Has talent acquisition strategy changed? If you are looking for some takeaways or notes, feel free to connect with Albert or myself to get the recording. We'll also be sending it out to everyone in case you missed a couple of items. We also have some upcoming webinars coming up. We have career coaches by Bohemond and Whitney Cole. They're going to talk about customizing your career strategy, as well as a couple of tips for salary negotiation. So this wraps up our session. Again, I'll put my LinkedIn in there, and then Paul and April, please do so as well. If you have more questions coming up, we'd love to connect with you and help you get to where you'd like to be in terms of resources you need, future events coming up. And again, top tips to stay competitive during this time. There's going to be a lot of people applying out there. How do you apply smarter? So on and so forth. So again, thanks so much. And then I'll turn it back to you, Albert.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Elisa, Paul, and April, for joining us this evening and spending the time. Thank you for those who are here tonight. We'll give you the recording in about 72 hours. This panel, as Elisa mentioned, is the first in a series of events that we're doing over the next month on the Great Resignation. This Thursday, we're hosting a webinar on how to break into tech with Sophia Metviva. She's a University of Chicago professor, serial entrepreneur, and somebody who's helped coach a lot of people break into the tech industry. So if that's something you're coming into here knowing and wanting today, that is very much available. On August the 10th, we're going to be sharing space with Eli Bohemond, who is an international career coach, and he's going to talk about deep diving in on your strategy, figuring out whether moving is something you should be doing or not, and whether you should have the conversation with your manager. A week later, on August 18th, we're sitting down with Workwell with Whitney Cole and her business partner to talk about how to negotiate your salary in these opportune times. So don't leave money on the table, and definitely don't think about negotiating your salary after you sign the offer letter. Be sure to join us at the link that I've put down here in the chat area, and we will see you there. Thank you again, everybody. Have a wonderful night, and we will talk to you all soon. Goodbye.
All right. Thanks so much.